At my granddaughter's birthday party, I handed her the gift I had made myself. My son-in-law barked, "Leave it in the box," then seized her arm before her fingers could reach the wrapping. "Someone like you has no place at my client's table." I held myself together and told him, "Don't speak to me that way in front of my grandkids." He closed the distance between us and struck me across the face right there with 50 guests looking on. Welcome back to Grandpa's Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we get into the story, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is it you're hoping to carry away from a story like this one? Sometimes we come looking for justice, sometimes for reassurance, and sometimes we're not quite sure until the end. Drop a word or two down below. I read everyone. Now, a quick note. Some details in this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters most is the truth underneath it. The kind of man who tallies his stitches at 11 Surrog at night beneath a yellow lamp inside a shoe repair shop on Coventry Road in Cleveland, Ohio, while the November wind hurls itself at the front window as though it bears a grudge. The kind of man who has spent 45 years doing precisely this, drawing waxed thread through good leather, one deliberate stitch after another. My name is Everett Dempsey. Most folks call me Ev. I'm 70 years old, and these hands say everything that needs saying without me opening my mouth. The knuckles have been swollen for years, thickened from a lifetime of gripping awls and hammers. The palms carry stains. No soap has ever managed to lift a permanent wash of contact cement, leather dye, and shoe polish, running through every shade of brown and black and dark burgundy. My wedding ring has pressed a groove into the finger beneath it, worn there by decades at the bench, and Nell once traced her fingertip along that hollow and said, "That's where you belong, Nell." Helen Dempsey, 67 years old. Eyes sharp behind her reading glasses and a laugh that begins somewhere chest deep and pulls the whole room into it. Right now, she's in the back feet resting on the ottoman, her mystery novel spread open across her lap, coffee cooling untouched on the side table. Same as always, because she falls so deep into the story, she forgets it's there. 42 years of marriage. There has not been one morning I woke up without feeling grateful for her. I set the needle aside and lifted what I'd been working on into the light. A small shoe-child size, narrow girl's fit, soft brown leather, rounded toe a single strap over the instep. 3 weeks ago, I'd cut the pattern from the finest hide remaining in my back stock, the premium stuff I ordinarily kept aside for customers who commissioned custom work and understood what that meant. I carved the sole by hand, punched each hole with a number 4 awl, and tonight was my 3rd session of stitching. Eve Nell's voice floated in from the back room. "You're going to go blind back there." "I can see fine," I called back. "You said that last year, and then needed new glasses." "I needed new glasses because the optometrist said so. That's a different thing entirely." Her chest-deep laugh reached me, followed by the quiet thud of her book, landing on the side table beside her cold coffee. She sighed. "Whose are those?" She appeared in the doorway wearing her robe, and Slipper's eyes narrowing at the small shoe in my grip. "Lily's," I told her. Something shifted in Nell's face the moment either grandchild was mentioned. It always did. The tension went out of her features, and the lines near her eyes settled into warmth. She came across the room and stood at my side studying the shoe. "Her birthday's in 3 weeks, she said. "I know when her birthday is, Nell. You're going to stitch your name inside." "I'm going to stitch her name inside," I said, along with something else on the insole. I guided her eyes to the faint pencil lines I'd already traced onto the leather lining. "Walk with kindness wherever you go." Nell's lips pressed together, and a brightness came into her eyes that made something tighten in my chest. "Everett Dempsey," she said, her voice low. "You are a good man." I worked the needle through the next hole and left her words hanging there unanswered, because 42 years has taught me that Nell tends to be right, and the wisest thing I can do is allow her to be right without turning it into a whole event. Lily Whitlock turns 10 this December. She is Karen's oldest one of those children who watches and absorbs, who grasps far more than the grown-ups around her ever imagine. She got Karen's dark eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, which means once she takes a position, she will defend it well past the point where most people move on. I adore her without reservation. Her brother Teddy is 7. Lily is measured and careful. Teddy is a force of nature in sneakers. The questions come out of him at a pace that would run a research librarian ragged. Last Tuesday on the school run, in the space of 12 minutes, he wanted to know why clouds don't fall, whether dogs dream about people or other dogs, and whether I had ever tasted something so wonderful it brought me to tears. I told him yes to that last one. He wanted to know what it was. His grandmother's apple pie, I said. He gave this a slow, solemn nod, the look of a boy whose suspicion had just been confirmed. That kid. I love him so much it unsettles me. Karen is 38. She has my frame solid compact, and Nell's laugh, though it surfaces less often these days. 6 years ago, she married Clyde Whitlock, and they've settled out in Solon, in a house with a 2-car garage and a stretch of lawn that demands mowing every 10 days all summer long. Clyde is in finance. 42 years old, broad across the shoulders, the kind of man who takes up a doorway and is perfectly aware of it. But I'm running ahead of the story. What I want to tell you, the part that matters, is a story that opens with this shoe and in its own way closes with it too. Before I bring you to that ending, though, I have to carry you back to where things began, to events most people never witnessed and never thought to ask about. For the first 4 years of Karen's life, I raised her on my own, while Nell waged a quiet war against a kidney condition that came close to taking her when Karen was just 18 months old. Through those 4 years, I kept the shop running stitched shoes for other families' children, made Karen's lunch each morning, and stayed at the edge of her bed each night until her eyes closed. We didn't have much, but what we had was sufficient because I stretched it far enough, one resoled boot and one repaired heel at a time. Karen grew up in this shop. She claimed that stool in the corner, the wooden one still standing there, still a little unsteady on the left leg, and worked through her homework, while I stitched and hammered and buffed around her. She never grumbled, never reached for what I couldn't provide. Through most of her growing up years, she was the finest thing in my life, apart from her mother. Sit with that picture for a moment, that small girl on the wobbly stool feet dangling above the floor, pencil scratching across a math worksheet while her father worked beside her. Because everything I'm going to tell you is a story about what becomes of love when it goes unacknowledged long enough. About what happens when the people you would give anything for begin to read your devotion as something closer to weakness. I rested the shoe on the workbench. 47 stitches finished, 31 remaining. "Come to bed soon," Nell called from the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. "Another hour," I told her. She fixed me with the look she has perfected over 10,000 repetitions, exasperation braided together with tenderness. Then she turned back to her book. I lifted the needle. I believed going in that Lily's birthday party was going to be a fine day. I was mistaken about that. But the reasons I was mistaken go back further than the party. They begin not with a birthday at all, but with a morning, an early one. 3 years before any of this, the morning I saw clearly for the first time what kind of life my daughter had built, and what was quietly holding it in place. The alarm sounded at 4:45, and I was already lying awake. That is simply the reality of being 70. Sleep stops being something you can count on, and becomes more of a possibility. Since 4:15 I had been on my back, listening to the wind off Lake Erie work at the storm windows, watching the clock digits flip, running through the morning's business the way I do every day. Lily had a spelling test. Teddy's permission slip for a field trip needed a signature. Karen had let it slip again, so the night before I'd set it on the passenger seat of my car. The weather app showed clear roads, but at 12 degrees, the truck would need a good 10 minutes before it was ready to move. I eased myself out of bed without disturbing Nell. She lay on her side toward the window, breathing slow and steady, her arthritic right hand resting loosely against the pillow. The joint medication deepened her sleep in the mornings, and that, as far as I was concerned, was its one worthwhile quality. Before I left the room, I drew the blanket up over her shoulder. Down in the kitchen, I put on coffee in the dark. While it brewed, I layered up thermal undershirt, flannel my heavy Duluth trading work jacket, wool cap pulled down over my ears. Then I stepped outside. Cleveland in October at 4:50 in the morning carries a cold that no one who hasn't endured a Great Lakes winter can truly picture. It doesn't wait for you to register it. It reaches your bones before you've fully processed that you're standing outside. The moment I pushed open the back door, my breath rolled out in a white plume. I crossed the driveway to my truck, unlocked. It got the engine going, then stood in the dark, running my ice scraper across the windshield, while the defroster worked at it from the inside. "Good morning to you, too," I said to no one in particular. After 45 years of early starts, I'd long since developed the habit of narrating them. I hit the passenger glass, the rear window, both mirrors. By the time I was done, my fingers were aching even through the gloves. I climbed in and held my hands over the heating vent while the engine came up to temperature. At 5:15, I backed out of our driveway on Coventry and pointed towards Solon. The roads were nearly deserted, a delivery truck on Mayfield, a lone jogger on Cedar, who dipped his head at my headlights the way you acknowledge the only other soul crazy enough to be out at this hour, which felt about right. I swung by Cafferty's Bakery on the corner of South Euclid, because Ray Cafferty cracked his back door open at 5:00 a.m. for the bread delivery, and had over the years fallen into the habit of setting aside 2 sausage and egg biscuits for me whenever he spotted my truck pulling up on a cold morning eve. Ray slid the wax paper bag across the counter without me saying a word. Cold one. Cold one? I agreed. I paid him and was back behind the wheel in under 3 minutes. I turned into Karen and Clyde's driveway in Solon at 5:38. The house sat dark except for the porch light Karen always left burning. I didn't knock. She'd handed me a key 2 years back when her work schedule pushed earlier, and I let myself in through the mudroom without a sound. The kitchen held the scent of last night's dinner, something heavy with garlic. I set the biscuit bag on the counter and went upstairs. Teddy's door was open. I nudged it wider and leaned in. He was flat on his back, one arm thrown across his face. His Minecraft comforter coiled around his legs, like he'd spent the night in a fight with it and come out on the losing end. I smiled so hard my face ached. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "Time to get moving." Teddy produced a sound that didn't belong to any known language but made his position on the subject of mourning abundantly clear. "I've got sausage biscuits downstairs," I said, one eye cracked open. "From Cafferty's." Both eyes came open. He pushed himself up, hair spiked in 4 directions, regarding me with an expression of bleary-eyed betrayal that was honestly the funniest thing I'd seen all week. "Grandpa," he said, "why is it still dark outside?" "Because the sun is lazy," I said. "Unlike us. Come on." I headed down the hall to Lily's room. She was already sitting up, reading lamp on a book spread open across her lap. That child. She glanced up when I appeared in the doorway, and her face opened into a grin that went ear to ear. "Grandpa." She said it the way Nell sometimes says, my name like the word itself is a complete thought. "You're already up," I said. "I've been up since 4:30. I had a dream about the spelling test, and it woke me." She swung her legs off the side of the bed. "Is Teddy awake?" "He is now." "Sausage biscuits?" "Cafferty's." Her eyes went wide. She was past me and into the hallway before I'd finished the sentence. I stayed in the doorway of her room, a moment, reading lamp. Still glowing book, splayed open on the pillow where she'd been lying. And I felt something rise in my chest, something too large to have a clean name for. The particular kind of love that has nowhere to go except to keep on being love. Downstairs, I unwrapped the biscuits while the kids dressed, poured 2 small glasses of orange juice, and dug through Teddy's backpack for the permission slip. It was there signed in my handwriting because Karen hadn't gotten to it. Clyde's coffee mug from the morning before sat in the sink still unwashed. I washed it. At 6:22, I had them both buckled into the back seat, Lily with her backpack on her lap, running through her spelling words, Teddy already halfway into his biscuit. "Grandpa," Teddy said, around a mouthful of egg, "do you think clouds have feelings?" "Teddy chew first," Lily said, without lifting her eyes from her words. "I'm chewing and talking at the same time. It's called multitasking." "It's called disgusting," Lily said. "Lily?" I found her eyes in the rearview mirror, and she wrestled down a smile. "Sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Grandpa," Teddy was back on the clouds. I think I said, working my way onto the main road, that if clouds had feelings, they'd feel pretty good about themselves. Picture being that big and getting to drift around all day. Teddy turned this over with great seriousness. "I would like that job," he announced. "Me too, buddy," I said. "Me too." I dropped them at the school entrance at 6:45. Teddy bolted for the doors, without a backward look, entirely consistent with his character. Lily stopped at the curb, then walked the 3 steps back to my window, which I rolled down. "Thank you for the biscuit, Grandpa," she said. Then she reached through the window and rested her small hand on mine, my old stained rough hand, just for a moment. Then she turned and walked inside. I sat in the pickup line after she disappeared through those doors. Something had thickened in my throat. I pressed my lips together and blinked hard twice. Then I pulled out of the lot and drove to the shop because shoes don't mend themselves, and neither does much else in this world. What I hadn't yet laid out for you, what I was only starting to see clearly during those early morning drives, was the full weight of what I was carrying. The grocery runs the driveway cleared in the dark before Clyde's car needed to get through. The permission slips the homework checks, the furnace calls, the money quietly spent. It had built up so slowly that I'd stopped thinking of it as unusual. It had simply become the shape of my days. Clyde never once cleared his own driveway that winter, not once. He walked out each morning to find it already done, and never thought to ask who had done it. That detail kept circling back to me on those cold drives home, not as anger, just as a quiet, growing awareness of something I didn't have a word for yet. I would find the words soon enough. January in Cleveland doesn't ask your permission. It comes in with the certainty of something that cannot be reasoned with temperatures plunging to the single digits lake effect snow, banking against front doors, the whole city shrinking into what feels like the last outpost before the edge of the world. I don't mind it. I've lived here every year of my life, and there's something straight and honest about a place that shows you exactly what it is. Nell and I had been in bed close to an hour on the night of January the 9th, when my phone lit up the nightstand. I had it before the second ring. Nell shifted beside me, but didn't wake. The name on the screen said Karen. 11:14 p.m. Something clenched in my chest before I even answered. Karen! I kept my voice level. Decades of early mornings had made me the kind of man who wakes already operating. Dad? Her voice was thin and tight, stretched with something close to panic. The furnace went out. It made this noise and then just stopped. It won't restart. It's 20 centigrade outside and the house is already dropping, and the kids... How long ago? I was already upright feet finding the floor. Maybe 40 minutes. I've been trying to get it going, but I don't know what I'm doing. A pause. And Clyde? A small pause, but I heard everything inside it. Clyde isn't feeling well. He's upstairs. I understood exactly what that pause meant. Clyde wasn't sick. Clyde simply had no interest in going out into 22-degree weather at 11:15 at night. I didn't say that to my daughter. Are the kids awake? I asked. Teddy woke up about 10 minutes ago. He was cold. I moved him into Lily's room with the space heater from my closet, but it's small. I'm on my way, I said. Keep that space heater away from the curtains and get them both under extra blankets. I'll call you when I'm 15 minutes out. I hung up. Nell was awake by then, watching me from her side of the bed, gray hair loose around her shoulders. What happened? She asked. Furnace at Karen's. I said, already pulling on my thermal layer. Nell started pushing herself upright. I'll come. Stay. I laid my hand on her shoulder, felt the warmth of her through the flannel. Your knee. Stay in the warm bed. I've got it. She caught my wrist before I could straighten. Her grip was steady, arthritis and all. Ev, be careful on those roads. I'm always careful. You drive like a man who thinks he's still 50, she said. But the worry in her eyes was real, so I bent down and kissed her forehead. I'll call you when it's sorted, I said. The cold outside hit me like a wall the moment I pushed open the back door. 12 degrees on my phone with a wind chill, the weather app put it feels like. 4, which was accurate and also somehow failed to capture the full picture. My truck had been sitting for 2 hours. The engine turned over with real reluctance as though it had taken the cold personally. I scraped the windshield in a hurry, my fingers howling inside my gloves, and pulled out onto Coventry. The Home Depot on Mayfield Road was one of the few places still open past 11. I knew this because this wasn't the first time I'd needed it at an unreasonable hour. I located a portable electric space heater rated for 1,500 square feet, enough to handle their main living area, and hauled it to the register myself, rather than stand around waiting for assistance. 47.62. I paid cash. I was back on the highway and moving by 11:48. Karen met me at the front door, still wearing her coat which she had on inside the house, and that told me the temperature had fallen faster than I'd hoped. Dad! She grabbed my arm the second I stepped through. Her face carried relief and guilt in almost equal portions. Thank you. I'm so sorry to call so late. I just didn't know what. Go check on the kids, I said, because I could see she was starting to spiral, and that wasn't going to help either of us. I'll look at the furnace. The basement stairs were off the kitchen. I found the light switch went down and stood in front of the furnace with my flashlight for a solid 3 minutes before I had a clear picture of what I was dealing with. The pilot light was out that I could have relit. But when I checked the igniter, the real problem revealed itself. A cracked heat exchanger. That meant this unit wasn't being restarted tonight, and likely not ever again. A cracked heat exchanger can push carbon monoxide into the living space. I had heard the first-hand years ago from a customer who had lost someone exactly that way. I wasn't touching the ignition. I went back upstairs. Karen was in the kitchen with her arms wrapped around herself inside her coat. "Tell me," she said. "It's the heat exchanger," I told her. "It's cracked. You can't run it even if you got it started. Carbon monoxide could move through the house." Her face went pale. "So, what do we— That's what this is for." I held up the box. "Runs on electric, covers the main floor. Get the kids into the living room with their blankets, set this up, and they'll be warm enough until you can get an HVAC company out tomorrow." "Dad, I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask me," I said. "I'm here. Show me where you want it." I set the heater up in the living room, ran the cord safely along the baseboard, and confirmed the outlet could handle the draw. Then, I went back down to the basement and disconnected the gas line to the old furnace properly so nothing could accidentally restart in the night. By the time I came back upstairs, Lily and Teddy were on the couch buried under a heap of blankets, the space heater humming in the corner. Teddy was already half gone, his cheek resting against his sister's shoulder. Lily looked up at me with those steady dark eyes. "Is it fixed, Grandpa?" "It's handled," I said, which isn't quite the same thing, but it was close enough for 11:30 on a Wednesday night. Lily gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said, with the quiet gravity of someone 3 times her age. I ruffled her hair, which she allowed with only a token objection. Clyde appeared at the top of the stairs at 1:23 in the morning. I know the exact time because I checked my watch the moment I heard his footsteps. He was in a t-shirt and sweatpants, squinting against the hallway light. He looked down into the living room, saw me crouch beside the heater, doing a final check, and said, "You get it working." Completely flat. No relief in it, no gratitude, no recognition whatsoever that his father-in-law was in his house at 1:00 in the morning in January because he himself had decided not to come downstairs. I straightened up slowly, my knees making their usual complaint about the cold. I looked at him. "The old furnace is done," I said. "New unit's electric. It'll hold the temperature through the night. Get someone in to replace the main unit this week. Don't restart the old one for any reason." Clyde gave a single nod, turned, and went back up the stairs. No thank you. No offer to see me out. Nothing at all. Just the sound of footsteps retreating toward the warm bedroom where he'd been the entire time. Karen walked me to the door. She had the look of someone with something sitting right at the edge of her lips, pressing to get out. But she pulled it back, and what came out instead was, "Drive safe, Dad." "I will," I said. I drove home in the dark. The roads were empty. The truck's heater ran fine, which felt at that particular hour like something genuinely worth being grateful for. Nell had left the kitchen light on. I came in through the back door, hung my coat on the hook, and lowered myself into a chair at the kitchen table. My knees ached. My hands were still stiff from the cold. The microwave clock said 2:17 a.m. Nell came downstairs in her robe at 2:23 because she had been awake this whole time, regardless of what I'd told her. She placed a mug of tea in front of me without a word and sat down across the table. She studied my face for a long moment, reading it with the fluency she has always had, a kind of understanding that has never stopped astonishing me. "Did he come down at all?" she asked. I wrapped both hands around the mug. The heat moved through my palms and up into my fingers slowly. "He came down at the end," I said, "to ask if it was working." Nell's mouth pressed into a thin line, and her jaw went tight. Then she reached across and covered both my hands with hers and held on. "Ev," she said, and her voice carried something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief, but lived somewhere in the space between them. "How much longer are we going to keep doing this?" I looked at our hands on the table, my stained, roughened old hands, and her smaller ones with the swollen knuckles she never made a fuss about. "As long as we need to," I said. But sitting there at 2 in the morning, with the cold still lodged in my bones, and the image of Clyde's back disappearing up those stairs, I felt the first hairline fracture open in that answer. Not a break, not yet. Just the beginning of a crack. I would discover in the months ahead that hairline cracks have a way of spreading. The morning of March 4th started like every other Tuesday. 4:45, the alarm coffee in the dark. Thermal layer, flannel Duluth, trading work jacket. I scraped the windshield while my breath turned to vapor in the cold air, then drove empty streets to Cafferty's Bakery on South Euclid. for the usual 2 sausage and egg biscuits. Teddy was harder to rouse than usual that morning. He'd stayed up past his bedtime reading a comic book under the covers with a flashlight, which Lily had reported to me the instant I walked in, with the satisfied expression of someone who had been holding that information all night, waiting for exactly the right moment to deliver it. "Teddy James Whitlock," I said, standing over his bed. One eye opened. "She told you." "She did." "Traitor," he muttered in the direction of the wall separating his room from his sister's. "Biscuit," I said. He sat up immediately. 7-year-olds are not complicated. By 6:15, both kids were buckled in the back seat. Lily was working through her vocabulary flashcards. Teddy was eating his biscuit with the locked-in concentration of someone diffusing something dangerous. The truck heater ran at full blast, and the radio was moving through the traffic report for a city still in the middle of waking up. We turned onto Bainbridge Lane. At 6:03, 31-degree light winds off the lake. That's when I saw it. Clyde's car, his black BMW, the one he ran through the car wash every Saturday and tucked into the garage every night. It was sitting at the curb in front of number 14 on Bainbridge Lane in front of Sandra Pruitt's house. My brain took it in the way it takes in something it isn't quite ready to process, first the color, then the make, then the plate, which I knew on sight, because I'd helped Karen sort through the registration paperwork 2 years back when Clyde let the renewal slip. 6:03 in the morning. Clyde had told Karen he had an early client meeting downtown. The front door of number 14 came open while I watched. Clyde stepped out, jacket on, keys in hand. Then Sandra Pruitt appeared in the doorway behind him. She had on a robe, the short kind, one hand resting against the doorframe, smiling at him, not the smile of neighbors exchanging a wave across the street. The light went green. "Grandpa, why did we stop?" Teddy asked. My foot found the gas. "Just making sure the road was clear, buddy," I said. My voice came out steady. I still don't know how. I watched them in the rearview mirror for 2 seconds before the bend in the road took them from view. Lily glanced up from her flashcards. Her eyes found mine in the mirror, those sharp, watchful eyes, and for one awful moment I thought she'd seen it too. Then she looked back down at her cards and said, "Asymptote, a line that a curve approaches but never touches." "That's right," I said. "I dropped them at school at 6:41. Teddy sprinted for the entrance. Lily stopped, turned back, and studied me through the passenger window. "You okay, Grandpa?" she said. "You got quiet." "Just thinking about the shop," I said. "Go learn something." She held me in that gaze a beat too long, the same look Nell gives me when she knows I'm not being entirely straight with her. Then she hoisted her backpack and walked inside. I pulled out of the school lot and drove exactly 4 blocks before I turned onto a side street and put the truck in park. I sat there for a long time. The heater kept running. The radio kept on being cheerful and indifferent, some song I didn't know. Outside, a woman walked a black lab past my window, without so much as glancing at the truck. I thought about Karen's voice on the phone in January, thin and threaded with panic. "The furnace is out, Dad." I thought about the groceries I loaded into their refrigerator every Wednesday and Saturday, the permission slips on my passenger seat, Lily on the school steps, Teddy in the back seat wondering about clouds, and that smile in the doorway of number 14. I called Nell. She picked up on the second ring, already awake already at the kitchen table with her coffee. "How are the kids?" she asked. "Good," I said. Teddy tried to sleep in. Lily's working on vocabulary words. "Asymptote," Nell said right away, because Lily had called her grandmother to practice the night before. "That's the one," I said. A pause. Nell reads my silences the way a musician reads a rest, not as absence but as its own kind of sound. "Ev," she said carefully. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," I said. "Long morning. I'll be at the shop by 7:30. I heard her breathe on the line. She didn't push. That is one of the things I have always loved most about Nell. She knows when to press and when to hold still. That morning, she held. "I'll have coffee ready," she said. "Thank you," I said. And then, because I needed to say something true to someone, I added, "Nell, everything's fine. I just need a minute." "Take 2, she said. "The shoes will wait." I hung up. I sat with my hands on the wheel for another 5 minutes. Outside, the black lab and its owner made the return trip along the sidewalk, the dog moving with the pure, unbothered optimism of a creature that has never once read a license plate at 6:00 in the morning and felt its sense of the world tilt sideways. I envied that dog enormously. The following Tuesday, I turned onto Bainbridge Lane at 6:04. The black BMW was there again. The Tuesday after that, 6:02 there again. I stopped checking after the fourth week because checking had begun to feel like pressing on a bruise. I knew what I had seen. The repetition only confirmed it. I did not tell Karen. Each morning I drove past that house, I ran the same calculation in my head. If I go to her now with nothing more than what I glimpsed through a truck window, Clyde will deny it. Karen will be shattered, and the only one who comes out looking like the problem is me. I needed more than what I had. What I didn't yet know was that Nell, sitting at home with her swollen knuckles and her cooling coffee and her reading glasses, had already begun gathering exactly that. The thing about Nell is that people have always sold her short. She's small 5'2" on a good day, and the arthritis has drawn her posture in over the last few years, so that she appears even smaller. She moves with deliberate care now, especially in the mornings when her knees are stiff working through our house in a set sequence kitchen counter, then the island, then the back of the chair that gets her from the bedroom to the coffee machine without overtaxing her right side. People see that careful movement, and they read fragility. What they miss is the mind behind it, sharp as a new awl and twice as precise. It was a Friday afternoon in April when it happened. I was at the shop. Nell had gone over to Karen's to sit with Lily and Teddy, while Karen ran errands, something she did every other Friday because Karen's work schedule made the after-school pickup difficult. Teddy had his old tablet propped against the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter, watching something loud about cartoon animals. Lily was at the kitchen table with her chapter book. Nell stood at the counter cutting apple slices, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, moving at the measured pace her knees required. Teddy's tablet pinged. He ignored it, absorbed in his cartoon. It pinged again. "Teddy, your tablet!" Lily said, without lifting her eyes from her book. "It's probably just the game," Teddy said. Nell glanced at the screen. It was not the game. It was a text notification showing on the lock screen before it faded. The tablet was an old one Clyde had handed down to Teddy, still connected to Clyde's Apple ID through the family sharing plan he managed, which meant certain notifications still pushed through from his accounts before anyone had thought to update the settings. Nell set down the knife. She did not snoop. That is important to understand. She picked up the tablet to silence the notifications so it would stop going off, and in doing so, the lock screen lit up again with the full message preview. She read it in the 2 seconds before the screen went dark. Tonight she's asleep by 10:00. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. Nell set the tablet back against the fruit bowl exactly as it had been sitting. She picked up the knife and finished the apple slices. Her hands were steady, which she felt proud of afterward, because her heart was hammering hard enough that she could feel it in her throat. "Grandma," Teddy called from the counter. "Can I have some of those? That's what they're for baby," Nell said. She brought the plate over ruffled Teddy's hair and went back to the sink. While the water ran over her hands, she reached into the pocket of her cardigan, where she has always kept a small notepad and a pen, a habit built over 40 years of grocery lists. And she wrote the number down, slowly and carefully, getting every digit right. Then she tore the page out, folded it once, and tucked it back in her pocket. That evening she told me what she had seen. We were in our kitchen after dinner, dishes done, table wiped. She placed the folded slip of paper on the table between us and pressed it flat with one finger. "That came through on Teddy's tablet this afternoon," she said. "Clyde's account." I looked at the number. Then I looked at my wife. "Nell, don't tell me it could be something else," she said. Her voice was quiet and completely without give. "I know what it means, and so do you." My jaw tightened. I pushed air out through my nose. "We need to be careful. We can't go to Karen with a phone number on a scrap of paper." "I know that," Nell said. "That's why I'm not going to Karen." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm going to be very patient, and I'm going to pay attention, because whoever that number belongs to is probably closer than we think." She was right, and she was proven right before the week was even out. Sandra Pruitt showed up the Thursday morning bearing a plate of pecan squares and one of her broad, easy smiles, greeting Nell as Mrs. C, the way she'd always done, standing there in the doorway in her yoga clothes, that highlighted hair of hers, catching the light, wanting to know if Nell needed her to pick anything up at the market. Nell thanked her and said she was fine, then spent 7 minutes with her on the front step, talking about nothing in particular, the whether Lily's school play coming up. Once Sandra was gone, Nell came back inside, pulled out her notepad at the kitchen table, and wrote the name down right beneath the number. The week after that, she brought something up with our neighbor Bev, a retired schoolteacher, sharp as a tack, who made it her daily business to walk past Karen's street twice before lunch, asking whether anything had seemed off around the neighborhood. Bev had noticed something as it happened. "That attractive blonde over on Bainbridge Lane," she said, sitting across from Nell over coffee. "Clyde Whitlock's car has turned up outside her house more than once early in the morning. Didn't seem like my place to say anything." Nell reached over and laid her hand on top of Bev's. "If you spotted it again, would you take a photograph?" Bev held her gaze for a beat. Then, "I'm out walking at 6. My phone's always with me." "Thank you," Nell told her. 3 weeks on, Bev handed over 4 photographs, each one time-stamped, the license plate reading clear. Clyde coming out through the front door of number 14. Nell slipped them all into a manila envelope. Then came the hotel receipt. She turned it up wedged beneath a sofa cushion at Karen's place, helping her get the house in order before a dinner party, the sort of thing that works its way out of a jacket pocket without anyone knowing. The receipt was from a hotel on Rockside Road. February's date printed at the top, charged against Clyde's personal card, nothing to do with their joint account. The whole time she was hunched down beside that sofa, her knees were punishing her for it. She didn't let that move her. She snapped a photo of the receipt on her phone, eased the original back into the gap where she'd found it, and pushed herself upright against the sofa, arm face set hard with the strain of it. "Everything okay in there?" "Mom," Karen called from the kitchen. "Just fine," Nell answered, straightening her cardigan. "Thought maybe you dropped an earring under here." Later that night, the photograph of the receipt went into the manila envelope with the rest. She kept the whole thing from me until the picture was complete. The evening she finally carried it out and placed it on our kitchen table, I went through what was inside and felt something inside my chest go quiet and cold and still. How long, I asked her. "Since April," she said. I stretched my arm across the table and covered her hands with mine, those swollen, careful, extraordinary hands. Something was sitting in my throat I couldn't get down no matter how I tried. "Nell," I said, and the word came out with more gravel in it than I'd meant. "Don't you dare feel sorry for me," she said. Her eyes were bright and fierce at the same time. "Feel sorry for Karen, and then let's work out what we're going to do." I held her hands tighter. She pressed back so hard my knuckles ached with it. Out in the yard, the season's first fireflies had come up, blinking in the dark above the garden beds that Nell's knees no longer let her crouch in, but which she still ran from a standing position every weekend, walking the rows at my side, telling me what wanted attention. The two of us had put something together over the years, something solid and unhurried and worth standing up for. I was starting to see that standing up for it was going to take something beyond patience. The gutter on the north face of Clyde's house had been separating from the fascia since sometime in October. I'd caught it the first time the fall, one of my regular grocery runs, stepping out and glancing upward the way a man does after decades of keeping an eye on things. The bracket had let go ice from the winter before most likely, and that whole section hung at an angle that made it a certainty it would come all the way down before spring arrived. I said something to Karen about it in November. She said she'd pass it along to Clyde. December came, and I brought it up again. He'd been tied up, she told me. Come May, I hauled my extension ladder down off the truck and handled it myself. Clyde was around that Saturday. He drifted out to the back deck with his coffee while I was perched near the top of the ladder, resetting the bracket and laying a line of exterior sealant across the joint. "While you're up there," he called out, "check the flashing on the left side, too. Might be lifting. Not so much as a good morning." No move to steady the ladder from below. Just the flat directive of someone accustomed to delegating. I checked the flashing. It was lifting. I fixed it. Didn't offer a word. On the way down, my right knee gave a little on the second-to-last rung, a habit it had picked up in the cold, a small failure I was still pretending not to notice. I grabbed the side rail, steadied myself, and made it to the ground clean. Clyde had already disappeared back inside. I was wrestling the ladder back onto the truck rack when Karen pushed open the front door. Dad. Keys in hand, guilt written across her face underneath a smile she'd arranged over it. "You really didn't need to bother with all that. Another rain, and that gutter was coming down anyway." "I know," I said. She rested a hand on my arm for a second. "Thank you, honestly." Her phone went off. She glanced at it, and the guilt dissolved into something else entirely. "I've got to get Lily to a birthday party. Teddy's in there with the TV. Go on," I told her. "I'll make sure everything's locked before I head out." She was halfway to the car before I finished the sentence. "Iced tea in the fridge if you want it," she called as she went. I got the ladder sorted and headed in to clean up. The kitchen sat quiet around me. Teddy was in the next room on the couch, cartoon noise leaking through from the TV. I ran the tap hot and scrubbed the sealant residue from my knuckles with the dish soap Karen kept on the left side of the sink, same brand Nell kept at home, which hit me somewhere in the chest in a way that had no good reason to. I had a clean view through the kitchen window, straight out to the sidewalk. Sandra Pruitt was making her way down the street. Workout clothes, headphones looped around her neck, one arm drifting out from her body at a slight angle, the unconscious posture of someone not quite comfortable, yet with something new on their wrist. A bracelet, gold fine link drinking in the May light. I shut off the water. The week before Karen had phoned me. Dad? I hate to keep coming back to this, but we're running a little short on Lily's spring tuition. The private school sends the second installment in May, and given everything I'd cut her off and said not to give it another thought, $800 went into their joint account that same afternoon. I finished drying my hands on the towel by the sink. Sandra had paused at the foot of the driveway, scrolling her phone. The bracelet picked up the light again. 70 years in this world, and I'm no expert on what jewelry runs. But I know the distance between something you pick up for $40 off a department store rack and something that cost real money. Quality has a look to it that doesn't lie. That bracelet had it. A cold weight settled in my gut. That evening I asked Nell if she'd searched something on her phone. I laid out the bracelet in as much detail as I could recall, the style of the chain, the way the clasp was set, the little pendant at the center, catching every angle of light. Nell tracked it down in 11 minutes, a jewelry retailer's website. $7.95s. I had sent $800. I stayed in my chair by the front window a good long while after that. Outside, the street was moving through its ordinary early evening rhythms. Children circling on bikes, a couple out with their dog, the Belford grandchildren running each other ragged across the front lawn. The world going on, unbothered and unbroken. I took the small brown notebook from my shirt pocket. I'd started keeping it back in February, the month I first knew I needed to be writing things down. I entered the date, the transfer amount, and beneath it, gold bracelet SP approx $7.95. I sat looking at the line I'd just written. Then I paged back through the entries before it and read through everything. 41 grocery runs since September, each one somewhere between $60 and $80. The furnace $47 in parts, 4 hours of my own labor at 2 in the morning. The gutter $12 in materials and 2 hours up a ladder on a knee that had no business being on one. 23 mornings this past winter with a shovel in my hands, 90 minutes each time. The permission slips the evenings at the homework table, the school pickups on the days Karen couldn't make it. The $800 that was now riding on Sandra Pruitt's wrist. I shut the notebook. Evie Nell's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She had that look she gets when she's already worked out what's in my head and wants me to say it aloud anyway because she believes in calling things by their true name. He took the money, I said. Yes, she said. The school tuition money. Yes. I got up from the chair. My knee was still protesting from the ladder. My hands felt weighted like they didn't belong at the ends of my arms. Nell. He looked me straight in the face every single time I came by to fix something in that house. He stood there watching me go up that ladder this morning. I know, she said. He called up and told me to check the flashing. My voice held steady, but only just. While he was out spending my money on Ev. Nell crossed toward me, took my face between both her hands, those small, stiffened, arthritic hands that had been holding me together for 42 years. She looked right into my eyes. Listen to me. We are going to handle this, but we're going to handle it the right way. Not today. Not tomorrow. When the moment comes, her thumbs rested gently along my jaw. Can you hold on a little longer? I brought my hands up over hers. My throat was burning. 17 years, I said. 17 years I've been walking in there, trying to earn some basic respect from that family. Nell's eyes went fierce and tender at the same time. You have their respect, she said. You have always had it, whether they know how to show it or not. And before long, Everett Dempsey, every person under that roof, is going to understand exactly what you're worth. Out front, the Belford grandchildren shrieked over something in the yard. The ordinary evening rolled on the way. Ordinary evenings do, right up until the point they don't. Lily's birthday invitation showed up in our mailbox 4 days later. Karen's text reached me on a Thursday evening while I was wrapping up at the shop. I'd just clicked off the front display light polishing cloth, still in my hand, when my phone buzzed against the stool beside me. Dad, Lily's birthday party is Saturday the 6th. Clyde's having some work clients over, so it'll be a larger crowd than usual. Hope you and Mom can make it. Starts at 2. I read it through twice. Not please come, not "we'd love to have you, hope you can make it." The kind of language you use for a mass notification. I typed back, "We'll be there. What time should we bring food?" 3 minutes passed. Then, "Oh, don't worry about that. Clyde's handling the catering." I slipped the phone into my pocket and went back to wiping down the bench. That evening, I told Nell. She was at the kitchen table with her crossword glasses sitting low on her nose. Her tea at her elbow had gone cold the way it always does. "Saturday the 6th, I said. "Lily's birthday. Clyde's making it a production, clients and everything." Nell set her pen on the table. "Clients," she said, with a particular flatness that carries more meaning than a full sentence. "I want to finish the shoes," I said. Her face shifted the way it always does when either of the grandchildren comes into the conversation. "How many stitches left?" 31. "Then get to it." She picked the pen back up. "I'm making the apple pie." "Nell, you don't have to do that." "Everett." She looked at me over the tops of those glasses with the expression that has closed approximately 4,000 conversations across 42 years of marriage. "Lily has asked me for that pie at every single birthday since she was 4 years old. I am not walking into her 10th birthday empty-handed. Now, go and stitch those shoes." I went. 3 evenings running, I stayed at the bench after locking up. I used a 2mm saddle stitch, 2 needles, 1 thread each stitch, locking against the one before it, so that if any single one ever let go, the rest would hold. Because Lily runs hard and these shoes had to last. Once the stitching was finished, I burnished the edges smooth with a bone folder, worked paste wax into the leather, and brought up the shine by hand. Then I pressed her name inside. Lily's small capitals stamped into the lining just above the heel, set deep enough to stay for years, and beneath the insole in the smallest letter set on my shelf. "Walk with kindness wherever you go." I placed the pair side by side under the lamp and took them in. My chest was full of something with no tidy name, pride and love, and underneath both, something quieter that I didn't look at too carefully. I wrapped them in brown paper, tied it with twine, and laid them inside one of the old dark green shop boxes with the gold lettering. I wrote Lily across the lid in clean block letters. The morning of Saturday, July the 6th, Nell was up ahead of me. When I came downstairs at 6:30, the apple pie was already in the oven. Cinnamon and brown sugar and Honeycrisp apples, the only variety Nell has ever used without a moment's doubt across 42 years of baking. The smell of it still makes my eyes sting when I let myself think about it. "You didn't sleep," I said. "The crust needed to rest overnight," she said, moving through the kitchen in the careful sequence she'd worked out for herself. Counter island chair back the route her knees allowed. "Sit down. I'll pour your coffee." I sat. I watched the morning light catch the silver running through her hair, and felt what I have felt on 10,000 mornings, that I was the luckiest man in Cleveland, Ohio. "How's your knee holding up?" I asked. "It gives me trouble every day," she said, settling across from me. "That's not the same thing as not being fine." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Ev, I want to say something about today." "Go ahead," I said. "Whatever comes up over there, keep one thing in your mind. We are going for Lily, not for Clyde, not for the clients, not to make any kind of point. We are going because that little girl is turning 10 and she wants her grandparents with her." She held my eyes. "Can you carry that with you?" "Yes," I said. She gave one firm nod and picked up her crossword. "Good. Now help me with 7 across. 9 letters. Persistence." "Endurance," I said. She counted on her fingers, wrote it in. "How do you always know that?" 45 years of practice, I said. We dressed in our best. My charcoal suit, which Nell had pressed the evening before with the unhurried care she gives to anything she decides is worth doing right. Her gray dress with the small ivory buttons and the pearl earrings I'd given her for our 30th anniversary. She looked beautiful. She always has, and I have never once stopped seeing it. I tucked the shoebox under my arm. Nell carried the pie. On the drive out to Solon, she told me something Lily had said the month before. While working through vocabulary words, that the word luminous sounded exactly like what it meant. Nell laughed, telling it the deep chest laugh of hers, and I laughed right along with her. For 20 minutes in that truck, I was genuinely and completely happy. I had no way of knowing it was the last uncomplicated moment I'd have for quite a while. We turned into the driveway at 1:55. I could hear voices and music before I'd even opened the door. Coming around to the back of the house, I counted maybe 40, maybe 50 people in good clothes arranged around catered tables with a bartender station Clyde had set up along the fence line. Nell's hand found my arm. I laid mine over it. "Ready," she said. Ready? I said. We went in together. Clyde spotted us within 30 seconds of our walking through the gate. He was stationed near the catering table, with a cluster of men, one hand easy in his pocket, the other wrapped around a glass of something clear. The posture of a man who has arranged every detail of the scene to his own satisfaction. When his eyes landed on me, something passed across his face. Not exactly hostility, more the expression of a man who has noticed something in the room that doesn't quite belong with the rest of the furniture. He came across the yard toward us, smile ready hand, already out. Ev, 2 firm pumps. Glad you could come. Wouldn't miss it, I said. He turned to Nell. Helen, you look wonderful. Thank you, Clyde, Nell said, in the exact register of a woman who has spent 42 years mastering the art of saying things that are entirely true without saying everything she means. His gaze dropped to the shoebox under my arm. A flicker of amusement crossed his face before he could quite contain it. What have you got there? Lily's gift, I said. He tilted his head at the dark green box, the gold lettering the name Lily in my block hand. A shoebox, he said pleasantly, the way a man says something that's meant to sound like simple observation, but arrives like a verdict. Well, that's something. 2 clients standing nearby caught it. One of them smiled at the box with that same carefully measured amusement, the kind that moves through a crowd on its own. My jaw went tight. Nell pressed her hand into my arm. One small, firm pressure. It is something I said. I made them. Clyde blinked. You made shoes. 45 years, I said. It's what I do. Before we go any further, I want you to sit with something for a moment. What I was about to learn about what had really been happening right under my nose would change the weight of everything that came before it. So, let me ask you this. If someone you loved and trusted had been quietly working against you, would you confront them the moment you found out? Or would you take your time and let the truth build its own case? Karen appeared from the direction of the house, moving fast with the flushed, overextended look of someone trying to keep too many plates in the air. She kissed Nell's cheek, then mine her eyes, tracking between us and Clyde with the watchfulness of someone reading 2 storms at once. The food's set up along the back fence, she said. Can I get either of you a drink in a minute? Nell said. Where's our birthday girl? Over by the bounce house with her friends. Karen's phone went off. She winced. 2 minutes. Make yourselves at home. I took in the yard. Every center table was occupied by Clyde's clients, men and women in good clothes, laughing with the practiced ease of people used to being the main event. Along the edges near the kitchen door sat 2 smaller folding tables with plastic chairs. Karen reappeared at my elbow, wearing the careful expression of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. Mom, Dad, would you mind sitting over there for now? She gestured toward the folding table closest to the kitchen door. Clyde's clients are spread a little thin, and it's crowded up front, just for a bit. Nell's hand tightened on my arm. Almost nothing. Almost. Of course, I said. The relief that moved through Karen's voice was genuine, which told me she'd braced for a fight and was glad not to get one. That fact settled in my chest like a stone. We took our things to the back table shoebox on the plastic cloth pie carrier set beside it. We sat down. Sandra Pruitt was near the main tables with a glass of white wine, the gold bracelet drawing light from every direction, her arm easy around Karen's shoulders. Karen was laughing with the open, unguarded warmth she saves for people she trusts completely. My stomach pulled tight. Beside me, Nell drew a slow breath in through her nose. Don't, I said quietly. Well, I wasn't going to, she said, but her hands folded on the table in front of her were pressed together hard enough to drain the color from her knuckles. Then Teddy came flying from somewhere and threw himself at me with the full, uncalculated force of a 7-year-old who has just spotted his favorite person, nearly sending the pie off the table in the process. Grandpa, both arms locked around my neck. You're here. I didn't know you were here yet. I held him and felt some of the stone in my chest begin to ease. We just got here, buddy. Where have you been, Bounce House? He pulled back, face flushed and delighted. Grandma, did you make the apple pie? Just for you and Lily, Nell said, her voice going entirely warm. Teddy's eyes went wide. Can I have some now after cake? After cake, Nell said. What if I have pie instead of cake? Then you'd be the smartest person at this party, Nell said. Teddy giggled and climbed into the chair beside her, pressing himself against her side. She put her arm around him and held on. I watched the tightness leave her jaw the moment she felt his small, solid weight settle against her. This is what we came for. 20 minutes went by. The party moved around us the way parties do when you're at the edge of them, present but peripheral, visible but not part of it. Clyde worked the crowd. His clients laughed. A young server came to a stop at our back table with a slightly uncertain look, as though no one had told him people would be seated here. "Can I get you anything?" "Whatever you have is fine," I said. I kept my hands flat on the table. I watched Sandra Pruitt laugh with my daughter. I did what I have always done in Clyde Whitlock's presence, absorbed, recorded, waited. Then from across the yard, Grandpa. Lily was running. Not the measured self-conscious movement of a 10-year-old performing composure. Running the way she ran at 6, at 7, at 8, full-speed arms, working hair coming loose behind her, her face carrying something so open and uncomplicated that my throat went thick. She hit me at full weight, both arms around my neck. "You came," she said into my shoulder. "I was looking for you. I couldn't find you anywhere. We've been right here the whole time," I told her. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. She pulled back and looked at the shoebox, then up at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "Is that mine?" "That's yours," I said. She reached for it. Her fingers found the twine. That was the moment Clyde arrived. He covered the distance in 8 steps. I counted because that is the kind of detail that burns into you when everything that follows burns into you. 8 steps from where he'd been standing with his clients to where Lily stood at our table with her hands on the twine of her gift. Lily. His voice was flat and pitched to Carrie. "Come back to the main table. Your friends are waiting." Lily turned to look at her father. Her hands stayed on the twine. "I want to open Grandpa's gift first." "You can open it later." He closed the remaining distance in one more step, placed his hand on her shoulder, and steered her away from our table, not gently. Lily stumbled, her feet scrambling to find the ground in an awkward skip. I rose slowly, deliberately, the way a man rises when his knees remind him to be measured about it. "Clyde, she just got over here. Give her a minute." He turned, the expression of a man who has been waiting for something to push against and has finally been handed it. "She needs to be with her guests." "She's with her grandparents," I said. "That counts." Something shifted in his face, a decision being reached. "You know what your problem is, Ev." His voice stayed low, but not low enough. The couple at the nearest table had gone still. "You show up to everything like your opinion belongs here." "Clyde." Karen's voice came from my left. She was moving toward us with that monitoring look she always wore whenever the two of us were in the same space. Clyde didn't glance at her. "You fix shoes," he said. "For a living. You drive over in your old truck and carry on, like that makes you someone worth listening to." My hands were at my sides. My heart was doing that slow, heavy thing. It does the thing I've kept off my face through 45 years of practice. "Clyde, stop it." Karen grabbed his arm. He shook her off. His eyes didn't leave mine. "You're nobody." A worn-out old man with shoe polish ground into his hands who can't read a room well enough to know when he's not wanted. I held his gaze for a long moment. Then I said quietly, "Don't speak to me that way, in front of my grandchildren." And Clyde Whitlock drew back his right hand and slapped me across the left side of my face. The sound was worse than the impact itself, a sharp, flat crack that moved through that yard, the way a stone moves through glass. In the half-second after the entire party snapped into a silence so total, I could hear Nell's sharp intake of breath from the chair behind me. Lily made a sound, small, fractured. Clyde's chest was heaving, his face dark. "Who do you think you are?" His voice was shaking, but not with remorse, with fury. The fury of a man who has done something he can't walk back and has resolved that the only answer is to go further. A broken-down cobbler telling me how to raise my own kids. "You fix shoes for a living. You don't get to stand in my yard and tell me a single thing." I did not raise my hand to my cheek. The pain was there, hot spreading. But I stayed exactly where I was. I looked at Clyde Whitlock, and I did not move. Karen stepped between us, her face drained white, both palms up. "Clyde, that is enough." "He started it," Clyde said. 6 years of undermining me under my own roof, and I'm through with it. "Dad?" Karen turned to face me. Her eyes were filling. Her voice broke clean down the middle. "Dad, please. Please don't let this get bigger. Today is Lily's birthday. Please just let it go." I looked at my daughter. The slap hurt. My face was still burning. But what Karen said reached somewhere the slap couldn't, the particular pain of a parent who has just watched their child pick the wrong side and say it out loud in front of everyone. Let it go. As though I were the one carrying something that needed releasing. I turned away from Karen not out of anger, but because there was something more important that needed doing, and it wasn't standing there being stared at. Nell had gotten to her feet. She had pressed herself upright using both hands on the table edge, and it had cost her. Her face was drawn, her right knee buckled slightly, her fingers gripping the edge hard to keep herself steady. Her eyes were burning with something far stronger than fear. I crossed to her in 3 steps, put my arm around her waist, my hand under her elbow. She grabbed my jacket with both fists. "Ev." Her voice shook. "I've got you," I said. I picked up the shoebox with my free hand. I did not look at Clyde. I did not look at the 50 people standing in that yard. I looked at Nell's face and walked her toward the gate. Teddy was standing about 6 feet away, frozen his face doing that thing children's faces do when they haven't yet decided whether it's safe to cry. He looked up at me with enormous eyes. "Grandpa," he whispered, "are you okay?" I crouched down, my bad knee screaming at me. "I'm okay, buddy." "You be good. I'll talk to you soon." His chin wobbled. He threw his arms around my neck and held on hard for 3 seconds, then stepped back with his jaw set in a way that looked so much like Nell's that my heart broke cleanly in 2. Lily was near the fence. She hadn't moved since the slap. Her face held shock and fury, and a grief too large for a 10-year-old to be carrying. She was pressing her own hands together in front of her, as though holding herself still by sheer force. I looked at her. She looked at me. I gave one slow nod. She pressed her lips together hard. Her eyes went bright with tears. She was not going to shed in front of her father's clients. That was the bravest thing I witnessed that day. Braver than anything I did. I walked Nell through the gate to the truck, helped her in, set the shoebox on the back seat, and started the engine. We drove away from that house, and neither of us spoke for a long time. When we finally did, what passed between us meant more than anything that had happened back in that yard. But I'll get to that. The street outside Clyde's house was doing what streets do on Saturday afternoons in July. A sprinkler sweeping in, slow arcs across a lawn 2 doors down. A kid on a bike threading around a parked minivan. Somebody's wind chime moving in the breeze off the lake. The ordinary and different continuity of a neighborhood that had no idea what had just taken place 40 feet away in a backyard. I drove south on Chagrin Boulevard, with both hands on the wheel, the shoebox on the back seat, and my wife sitting very still in the passenger seat beside me. The left side of my face was still warm from Clyde's hand. I did not touch it. Nell spoke first. We were 3 blocks from the house. "Ev." Her voice came out careful and low, the way you handle something that might break. "How bad is it?" "It's fine," I said. "Don't do that." She turned in her seat to look at me directly. Her eyes were red at the edges, not from crying. Nell does not cry easily. It was the particular strain of someone holding something enormous at arm's length. "Don't tell me it's fine when I was sitting 4 feet away." "My face is fine," I said. "That part is fine." She understood the distinction. She turned back toward the windshield. Outside, a traffic light cycled green to yellow to red, and I stopped behind a station wagon with a kayak strapped to the roof. She didn't say anything. Nell said. "Not a question." "No," I said. The light went green. She said, "Please don't make this bigger," I said. My voice held level, and that cost me something I couldn't have put a number to. She said it was Lily's birthday. Nell's breath came out through her nose in one long, controlled exhale. Her right hand resting on her knee, curled slowly into a fist, then opened again with deliberate care, 1 finger at a time. "Karen," she said finally. And the way she said it, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with the bone-deep exhaustion of a mother who loves her child and has run out of ways to reach her, that was the sound that finally tightened my throat, past the point where it was easy to manage. "She's frightened," I said. "She has been for a long time. Being frightened doesn't make it right." "No," I said, "it doesn't." We covered the rest of the drive without speaking, not because there was nothing left to say, but because some things require a kitchen table and something warm in your hands before they can be said the right way. I pulled into our driveway on Coventry Road at 3:41. The shop was closed and dark. The front garden, which Nell walked me through every weekend and directed down to the last detail, had the particular late afternoon look of something well tended. The black-eyed Susans she had put in along the fence stood open and bright in the sun. I came around to Nell's side and opened the door. She took my hand getting down, and when she was standing on the driveway, she didn't let go right away. She stood holding my hand in both of hers and looked up at my face. "It's going to leave a mark," she said. "I've had worse," I said. "Not from family," she said. That landed exactly where she intended it to. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table while Nell made her way along her careful route to the stove and put the kettle on. The kitchen held the smell of the morning's coffee and the ghost of the apple pie she had carried to a party that didn't deserve it. The pie was still in the car. I had forgotten it. We had both forgotten it. The pie, I said. Leave it, Nell said. I'll make another one, for people who earned it. I put my elbows on the table and pressed my face into my hands. Not because I was falling apart, because I needed 30 seconds without anyone looking at my face while I found the place inside myself where I keep everything I choose not to show. Nell set a mug of tea in front of me. She sat across the table. She pushed the sugar bowl my way, even though she knows I take it plain, a 42-year habit of offering that I have never once corrected because I find it entirely too endearing to correct. Tell me what you're thinking, she said. I wrapped both hands around the mug. I'm thinking about Teddy's face when we were leaving, I said. Nell's expression drew tight. Me too. He's 7 years old. He didn't understand what happened, I said. He just knew something was wrong and wanted to fix it. He hugged you, Nell said. 3 seconds, I said. I counted. I felt him counting. Nell pressed her lips together. Her chin moved slightly. And Lily, I said, standing at that fence, refusing to cry, not willing to give him that satisfaction in front of his people. She gets that from you, Nell said. She gets it from you, I said. Nell shook her head. She gets it from both of us. And she's going to need it. She picked up her mug, set it back down without drinking. Ev, what are we going to do? I had been turning the answer over since the moment we cleared that driveway. We're not going back, I said. I know that. And we're not calling them, I said. Not tomorrow, not to smooth it over. Not to hand Karen the chance to tell me I overreacted, agreed, Nell said. And the transfers stop, I said. The grocery runs, the school pickups, the repairs, all of it. Nell nodded slowly. They'll feel it fast, she said. Yes, I said. They will. I got up from the table, went to the small desk in the corner of the kitchen where I keep the brown notebook, sat down, and wrote the date, the location, the sequence of events, Clyde's words as precisely as I could hold them in my head. Karen's words. The 50 people standing in that yard. I wrote it all out in the same careful block lettering I had used to write Lily across the top of that shoebox. When I finished, I held the page for a moment. Then I added one more line at the bottom. The shoebox is on the back seat. I still have it. I closed the notebook. I went back to the table. Nell had refilled both mugs without my noticing. Tomorrow morning, I said, I'm not starting the car. Nell reached across the table and laid her hand over mine. No, she said, you're not. We sat there in the kitchen as the afternoon moved toward evening, the light through the window shifting from gold to amber to the deep orange of a Cleveland summer sunset. And we didn't need to say anything more because we had already said what needed saying, and what remained was simply the quiet work of two people who have spent 42 years building something together and are not about to let someone else take it apart. The next morning, Sunday, I made coffee. I did not start the car. Across town, 2 children stood at a front door that no one was coming to knock on. I heard about the first week from Lily. She called me on the Tuesday after the party from her bedroom, in the careful hush voice of a child who has made sure both parents are occupied before picking up the phone. 7:43 in the evening. I was in the shop doing inventory when my phone lit up with her name. Grandpa, she said, with such carefully held-in relief that my chest pulled hard. Hey, sweetheart, I said. You okay? I'm okay. A pause. Teddy cried this morning at school. Drop-off. He didn't want Mom to leave. He kept saying it wasn't right without you. I set down the box I was holding. What did your mom do? She hugged him for a really long time, and then she was late for work. Another pause. She got a message from her boss about it. I closed my eyes for a second. So I opened my eyes because keeping them shut wasn't doing me any good. How are you holding up? I asked. Grandpa, I'm fine, Lily said, in precisely the tone that means she isn't. Then, because she's Lily and can't keep up a front for more than about 4 seconds. Math is harder when I can't ask you things. I got it wrong twice and had no idea until the teacher handed it back. Which chapter? Fractions the dividing kind. You invert the second number and multiply through. You know this already, I told her. It's just a matter of drilling it. I know. Something in her voice went quieter. Everything's easier with you around. My throat pulled tight. I know it is, sweetheart. Grandpa? A hesitation. Are you going to come back? I took a breath before answering. I'll always be your grandfather, I said. Nothing touches that. But things had to change around here. Does that make sense to you? Silence stretched out. Because of what Dad did. Because of what happened at the party. That's right. He never said he was sorry, she told me. Her voice had taken on a particular flatness and precision, the register she uses when she's laying out a fact she finds deeply wrong. Not to you, not to Grandma either. He told Mom the whole thing was nothing, and that you were the one who started it. The pen I was holding dug into the inventory sheet hard enough to leave a small tear. I pressed my thumb across it. "How is your mom doing?" "She's worn out," Lily said. "She's been getting home later because there's nobody to pick us up from school now, and 2 nights ago, dinner was cereal because she never made it to the store." A pause. "Cereal's a camping thing, not a Tuesday night thing." "Could be worse," I said. "Wrong cereal," Lily said. "The kind with no flavor and no sugar." Teddy cried about it. In spite of everything, something inside me almost loosened into a smile. Teddy cried over cereal. "Teddy has cried about everything this week," Lily said, and underneath her words was a strand of real, unchildlike worry. "Grandpa is Grandma all right? He keeps asking about her?" "Grandma is doing fine," I said. "Her knee gives her some grief, but she's home and she's well. Go ahead and tell Teddy she baked a batch of oatmeal raisin cookies just yesterday." "What kind?" A sharp little breath. "Those are his favorite." "I know they are," I said. A pause settled between us. "Then, can we come over?" That question hung there for a moment. I turned over what it would take the conversation with Karen that still hadn't happened, the steps that couldn't be jumped. "Not just yet," I said, "but before too long." "All right," she said. Then so quietly I almost missed it. "Grandpa, I'm sorry about your face." Without thinking, my hand moved toward my cheek. The skin still carried a faint tenderness, a slight mark that Nell had studied on Tuesday morning, with a look that communicated everything she wasn't going to put into words. "Don't carry that," I told her. "That's not something you need to be sorry for." "Do you hear what I'm saying?" "Yes," she said. "But I'm sorry anyway." We stayed on the line a while longer. She told me about a book she'd gotten into something with dragons in it, and a girl who had the gift of talking to them. I asked her real questions about it, because I wanted to know, and because she needed a few minutes of conversation that had nothing to do with the mess the last week had made. By the time she said goodnight, her voice had lost some of the tightness it had when she'd first called. After we hung up, I stayed in the shop, without moving for a while, inventory half finished at my elbow. The familiar mingled smell of leather and contact cement hanging in the air, and around me, the quiet of a place that has absorbed 40-some years of one man's working life. Through Lily's calls that week and the one that followed, I got a clearer sense of what Clyde and Karen's days looked like now that the structure underneath their lives had been pulled away, the structure they'd never once stopped to name. Monday, no school pickup. Karen slipped out of the office 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Her manager followed up in writing. Tuesday, no grocery run. Karen ordered delivery instead, $63 before tip. Wednesday, a bathroom faucet that had been barely trickling for 3 weeks gave out entirely. Clyde pulled up a YouTube video and had a go at it himself. He made things worse. A plumber came out Thursday, 240s. Still Thursday. Teddy's field trip permission slip sat on the counter, unsigned and forgotten, until his teacher reached Karen at work. Karen left yet another meeting to deal with it. Friday, for the first time, Lily walked into an empty house after school. She had 12 minutes by herself before Karen got there. Lily said those 12 minutes felt very long. I want to be honest about what I felt when I heard all this. Not satisfaction, not a trace of it. What settled over me was a dull-weighted grief at the gap between how much I had quietly carried for that household and how little of it had ever been recognized. Karen tried me on the Friday evening. I let the phone go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. After that, she rang Nell. Nell picked up. I stood in the kitchen doorway and caught one side of the exchange. Nell's voice measured, unhurried. "I understand, Karen." Then, "Yes. I know this is hard." Then a long pause during which I could hear Karen's voice on the other end, climbing in speed and pitch. Then, Nell calm and steady. "Sweetheart, your father hasn't gone anywhere. He's exactly where he's always been. The real question is whether that's something you can see right now." A few more words from Karen, then the line went quiet. Nell put her phone face down on the counter and turned to look at me. "She's in a hard place," Nell said. "I know," I said. "She hasn't gotten there yet," Nell said. "But she's closing in on it." Closing in wasn't the same as arriving, and what I didn't know yet was that the thing that would finally bring Karen all the way there wouldn't come from me or from Nell. It would come from Lily. Karen's call arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks past the party. I was putting a new sole on a pair of work boots, the serious kind, the ones a man sets money aside for and brings in, because buying new isn't something he can manage. Work, I've always taken care with. I was partway through the second boot when the phone buzzed on the corner of my bench. I looked at the screen. Karen. I put the boot down and answered. Dad? Her voice had the tightened quality of someone who has spent a good stretch preparing for a conversation and run through the first line more than once. There's something Clyde told me that I need to bring up with you. Go ahead, I said. He told me. She paused, then started over. He said you've been talking to people about him and Sandra, about the two of them having some kind of involvement. Her delivery was flat in the particular way of someone reciting words they haven't fully decided to believe. He says you've been putting things out there because you never liked him and this was your chance to make trouble. I placed the stitching tool down on the bench with deliberate care. Out on Coventry Road, a truck went by, heavy enough to rattle the front window in its frame. Karen, I said, I have not breathed a word to a single person about Clyde and Sandra. Then why does he think you suspect something? Because he read it in my face, I said. A man who's doing what he's doing can always tell when somebody's worked it out. The pause that followed stretched long enough for me to hear her breathing across the line. Dad, he wept, she said, and her voice snagged a little on the word. When I confronted him, he completely broke down. He said he's been holding everything together by himself, and now you're turning his own children against him, and it's too much for him to take. I held my molars together and let a slow breath out through my nose. Has he said specific things to Lily or Teddy that made you think? He said you said things to Lily. Karen came in fast on that. At the party before, it all went wrong. He says you took her off to the side. I spent about 4 minutes with Lily, I said, talking about fractions and a book with dragons in it. Dad, Karen. I kept my register, even each word clear. I did not take your daughter aside and speak against her father. 3 years of Tuesday math sessions. Fractions are what comes up. Another pause, this one heavier. He said, Karen stopped, gathered herself, tried again. He says you've resented him from the very beginning, that you never believed he deserved me, and that pulling our family apart is your way of proving you know better than everyone else what kind of life I ought to have. The boot in front of me on the bench. Good leather scuffed at the toe, brought back twice before this one. Somebody's working life in that leather. Someone who trusted me to get this right. Can I ask you one thing? I said. What? When Clyde was crying, I said, did he actually answer the question you put to him? Did he tell you straight out whether anything is going on between him and Sandra? The quiet that came after that was answer enough on its own. He said there's nothing going on, Karen said at last. He said she's just a neighbor, someone the family knows, and that you've built a whole story out of nothing. Okay, I said. Okay. Her voice went harder. That's all you're going to say. Karen, I'm not going to sit here and defend myself against whatever Clyde told you in your kitchen. I said, you'll believe whatever you've already decided. That's your right. So, your answer is to go on punishing every one of us, she said. The practiced calm she'd been holding had cracked apart. What came through instead was something scraped and bone-tired. You're going to keep staying away, keep not showing up, keep leaving us to manage on our own, all because somebody wounded your pride at a birthday party. The word pride. I sat there gripping the phone, staring at the boot resting on my bench, and my mind ran the ledger, $47,000 across grocery runs and school pickups and furnace repairs and gutter replacements and tuition payments. Sandra Pruitt's bracelet. Clyde's voice drifting up from the deck. While you're up there, check the flashing too. What was injured wasn't my pride, Karen, I said, keeping my voice low. Then what was it? It was your daughter's. I said that while standing in a yard watching their grandfather take a blow. That's what it was. She didn't answer that directly. What she said instead was, he came to me and apologized, Dad. He knows he crossed a line. He's working on it. Good to hear, I said. But you're still not coming back. Not yet, I said. No. The breath she let out had an edge to it. I can't go on managing this without, and she stopped herself mid-sentence. Without what I asked. A silence stretched. Then soft, almost private, without the things I never noticed you were carrying. It was the nearest she'd gotten to saying it, flat out. I left it alone. She wasn't ready to take it all the way to the end. Pushing a person toward a truth they can't hold, yet just makes them flinch away from it. I love you, Karen. That hasn't changed, I said. Then why does this feel like I'm being punished because you're finally feeling a weight that was always there? I said you just never had to bear it yourself before now. She got off the phone soon after. I set the receiver down on the bench next to the boot and stayed there with the particular weariness of a man who has told the truth and understands it won't land yet. Not yet. Not coming from this angle. Nell came through the shop doorway at 5:30, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She took one look at my face, took her maybe 3 steps from the door to the bench, and she already knew. So, Clyde laid it all out for her, she said. Not a question, the way she said it. He broke down, I said. Something moved through her face that wasn't easy to name, and she took him at his word. Enough to pick up the phone, I said. Not enough to be sure of anything. Nell placed the mugs on the bench and dragged the customer stool over. She settled in across from me, both palms cradling her mug, and fixed me with those level eyes that have always been the thing I trust most in this world. Ev, she said, truth doesn't require any help from us. Give it room and give it time. I lifted the boot, picked up where I'd left off on the risole, drew the first stitch through. How long is that going to take? I said. The corner of Nell's mouth shifted into something short of a smile. Shorter than you're figuring, she said. Lily sees what's going on. I raised my eyes to meet hers. She held my gaze across the rim of her mug. Out on Coventry Road, the late afternoon light had turned golden through the shop windows, catching the suspended dust and making it look like something worth seeing. The call arrived on a Tuesday evening during the 3rd week of August. Not Lily this time. Karen, Nell and I were still at the kitchen table working through a beef stew, the slow cooker kind with carrots and potatoes and a sprig of thyme, the dish she's turned out every other Tuesday for 30 years. My phone went off next to my plate. 8:14 p.m. Nell glanced over. I picked up. Dad? Nothing tight or rehearsed in her voice this time. It was split wide open raw, the way a person sounds when something enormous has been pried loose from inside them and the place where it sat is still bleeding. Can you talk right now? I pushed my chair back from the table. I'm here. Tell me what happened. What came through the line wasn't really a word. It was the sound a person makes when they've been bracing under a load for too long and their legs have finally buckled. Lily told me something tonight, she said. My eyes found Nell across the table. She put her fork down. She's been watching Clyde go over to Sandra's place in the mornings, back when you were the one taking them to school. Her voice fractured on it. He told her to keep quiet adult business, he said. She wouldn't understand. Where is she right now, I asked. In her room. Teddy's asleep. A beat of silence. She was crying the whole time, she told me. She kept apologizing, like somehow this was something she'd done. I held on to her and made sure she heard me. This is not on you, and I don't know what to. She stopped, pulled in a shaky breath. Dad, what am I supposed to do tonight? Go back to Lily's room, I said. Sit beside her. Tell her she didn't do a single thing wrong, that she was brave, that coming out with the truth was exactly the right call. And after that, let this night be what it is. I said, not everything has to be figured out before morning. A long quiet. Then did you know I turned it over in my mind, the black BMW on Bainbridge Lane, at 6:03 in the morning. Nell's manila envelope. The $795 bracelet. There were things that pointed somewhere wrong. I said, it wasn't my place to tell you any of it before you were in a place to hear it. Karen let out a sound that couldn't decide between crying and laughing. That is such a dad thing to say. It's also the true thing, I said. I went at him about it, she said. He denied the whole story, said Lily got it twisted. Said a girl that age lives in her imagination, and what she probably saw was him dropping off dry cleaning. The slow cooker ticked and hissed on the counter. I pushed my back molars together. Dry cleaning, I said. At 6 in the morning, Karen said, from a neighbor's house. A pause and something torn open was sitting inside it. And the worst of it, Dad. For maybe 30 seconds, I nearly let myself go along with it, because going along would have been so much easier than standing here right now. I know, I said. But then Lily's face came back to me, what she looked like when she finally got the words out. She was scared half to death to say it, and she said it anyway. That's not a little girl spinning a story about dry cleaning. No, I said, it isn't. He picked up his keys and walked out the door the second I told him I didn't buy it. Her voice lost its footing. I'd rather not know where he ended up tonight. That's all right, I said. Dad. Long pause. I owe you an apology for what I said at the party, for telling you to just drop it. Her voice went quiet and small. Deep down somewhere I wasn't willing to look. I think I knew things weren't adding up, but I picked him anyway because the fear of the alternative was bigger than what I knew, and then you were the one who paid for it in front of everyone. My throat went tight in a way that made talking hard. Karen, no. Said it gently, but I meant it. Let me get through this. You came out in blizzards for us. You were there at 2 in the morning when something broke. You sat at that little plastic table at Lily's party and held yourself together and never said one word out of place. You didn't owe us that. And then he hit you, and I stood there and told you to drop it. Her voice gave all the way. I told you to just let it go, Dad. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth and waited until I could speak. You were frightened, I said. That still doesn't make it right. I know that I said, but I understand how it happened, and I love you. Both of those are true, sitting right alongside each other. Then she really cried, not the careful, controlled kind, but the kind that's been dammed up for weeks and weeks and has broken through at last. I sat with the phone against my ear and listened to my daughter fall apart from 8 miles off, and I felt the full weight of those 8 miles. Nell had her eyes on me from across the table, her face running through everything it always runs through when one of her children is in pain. Brow furrowed, jaw, set eyes lit with a sorrow that isn't hers, but that she carries anyway. I stretched my arm across the table and laid my hand over hers. She flipped her palm and closed her fingers around mine. Once Karen's breathing came back to something steady, I said, "Go be with Lily. Nothing matters more than that right now." Okay, a pause. Dad. Yeah. Thank you for not reminding me you were right. That's not a thing I'd do, I said. I know, she said. That's exactly why I wanted to say it. She hung up. The beef stew had gone cold on both our plates. Neither of us reached for a fork. Nell pressed my hand tight. Her eyes were glistening. Lily told her, I said, yes. Nell's chin pulled once briefly before she steadied herself. That child is going to come through this just fine, Ev. I know, I said. I looked down at our hands resting together on that table mine, rough and stained hers, swollen and deliberate. 42 years of hands on this table between us. Nell. I said I believe it's nearly time. She reached into her cardigan pocket and laid the manila envelope on the table between our plates. Her eyes didn't waver. Almost she said, but there's one thing still left to take care of first. Out on Coventry Road, a neighbor's porch light clicked on against the gathering dark. Summer had begun to sense it was running out of weeks. I picked the envelope up on Thursday morning, August the 22nd. Back in June, during the last repair job I'd done at Clyde and Karen's before the party, I'd left my pipe wrench behind. A slow drain in the upstairs bathroom cleared it with a hand snake. The wrench had been sitting on my work cloth on the bathroom floor, and somehow, when I packed up, I'd walked out without it. I needed it that afternoon. A customer named Hal, a retired postal worker, who'd been bringing his shoes in every spring and fall for years. Always good for a 20-minute conversation, had a leaking pipe beneath his kitchen sink. Hal was 81, and on his own, the sort of man who'd let a drip quietly worsen rather than ask anyone for help. I phoned Karen first. She told me to come over. Clyde had been at a hotel since Tuesday. I drove out to Solon at 9:15. Karen opened the door, looking like she hadn't managed more than 4 hours of sleep in 2 days. Hair pulled back, coffee in one hand, laptop tucked under the other arm. She squeezed my wrist as I stepped inside. The wrench is probably still in the upstairs bathroom, she said. Teddy and Lily are over at my friend Paula's. I didn't want them around while things are still this unsettled. 2 minutes, I said. The wrench was sitting right where I had left it on the back of the vanity cabinet. I dropped it in my tool bag and headed down the stairs. That's when I heard it. The garage door was standing open. Clyde's car was in the driveway. I'd clocked it on the way in and set it aside in my mind. What I hadn't accounted for was Clyde himself at the far end of the garage near the workbench I'd put in for him 3 years back. His back to the house phone pressed to his ear. I stopped at the foot of the stairs. The door was ajar. I wasn't hiding from anyone. The words were already reaching me before I'd made any choice about listening. The market's right for it. His voice was low and clipped. Wexford at the firm thinks we can list by mid-September. Price it correctly, we close by November. A pause. Between the equity and what I've been building in my personal account, there's a solid down payment on the Chagrin Falls place. The one I showed you, his tone shifted, softened. I know it's been a long time. Just a little longer. Once I file, it's done. 6 weeks, maybe 8. I stood without moving. She doesn't know about the Chagrin Falls property. He said she's too busy falling to pieces to look at anything financial, and her father helped with that. All the trouble with him handed me enough cover. She got so wrapped up in that whole situation, she stopped watching the accounts. He laughed, a short, easy laugh. The laugh of a man who likes what he sees in the mirror. I looked down at the pipe wrench in my hand. My knuckles had gone white around the handle without any instruction from me. I stood there and breathed deliberately for 30 seconds. Then, I walked back up the hallway toward the front door. Karen looked up from her laptop. "Find it okay right where I left it," I said. My voice came out level. "To this day, I'm not sure how." She studied my face. "Ev, something's wrong. Is Clyde planning to put this house on the market?" I asked. The color drained out of her face like water leaving a glass. "What, he's out in the garage." Door was open. I didn't set out to hear any of it, but I heard it. Karen put her coffee down. Her hand was shaking. She pressed her palm flat to the counter to keep it steady. "Tell me what he said." I gave her all of it: the mid-September listing, Wexford at the firm, the Chagrin Falls property, the filing timeline, and the part that concerned me most, how the trouble with me had given him the cover he needed to shift money around, while she was too distracted to notice. By the time I'd finished, Karen was on the kitchen floor. Not in any dramatic way, she simply reached back toward the cabinet behind her and sank down until she was sitting on the tile knees, up both hands pressed flat against her mouth, eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance. "He was planning to sell my house," she said. "Our house. And pocket the money." That's what it sounded like I said. "He showed me a Chagrin Falls listing," once she said, her voice gone thin. "Said it was for investment purposes. And about 2 months ago, I signed something. He said it was routine paperwork for a bank review. I didn't look at it closely. Her hands pressed harder against her mouth. I crouched down in front of her. My bad knee sent fire up my leg. I didn't care. "Karen, get an attorney on the phone today. Not tomorrow. Today. Don't put your name on anything else. Don't touch any joint accounts. And don't let him back through that door until you know exactly where you stand. Do you understand me?" Her jaw set in a way I knew at once. Nell's jaw. The one that shows up on the women in my family when they've made the switch from falling to standing. I reached into my jacket and set the manila envelope on the tile between us. "Your mother put this together over 4 months, quietly, carefully, without breathing a word, until she was certain it was right." Karen lifted it with both hands. "Mom did this." "Your mother has had her eyes open since April," I said. "She does things right and without any fuss, and everything in there is exactly correct." Karen's eyes spilled 2 tears, one from each running straight and clean down her face with the particular composure of a woman who is crying on purpose rather than collapsing. "I have the best parents," she said. Her voice broke on the last word. My throat shut all the way. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way I used to when she was 4 years old. She leaned her head into my palm for just a moment. "You're going to be okay," I said. "I know," she said, and she meant it. I helped her to her feet and left her at the kitchen table with the envelope, her phone, and the attorney's name Nell had written on a sticky note tucked inside, because of course she had. I drove over to Hal's with the pipe wrench riding on the passenger seat. Fixed his leak in 40 minutes. He put on coffee and spent 25 minutes telling me about his late wife's garden and the particular early ripening tomato varieties she'd favored. I listened to every word and was grateful for every one of them. On the way home, I called Nell. "She has the envelope," I said. "Good. The attorney's number is inside." A pause and then warmly, "That's my girl." "Which one?" I said. Nell laughed the full, deep laugh that has been the best sound I know for 42 years. "Both of them," she said. I put the sign up on a Friday evening, printed it at the shop on the good card stock I keep for order receipts. Clean block letters, the same font I've had on the shop's front window for 30 years. Neighborhood Thank You Gathering, Saturday, August 30th. 6:00 p.m., Dempsey residents all welcome. I taped one copy to the front window and one to the lamppost at the end of the drive, then let it go and thought nothing more of it that night. By Saturday morning, Bev had called to ask what she could bring. By noon, I'd heard from the Belford family, Lou and Linda Cipriani, 2 doors down, 3 families from Lily and Teddy's school carpool, and Gord, who'd been dropping off his cowboy boots since 1986 and considered that history sufficient grounds for a standing invitation to anything I put together. I told everyone the same thing. Come as you are. Don't bring what you can't spare. This is a thank you, not a production. Nell started cooking Friday night. By Saturday afternoon, the kitchen carried the smell of beef stew, apple pie, and the warm spice of oatmeal raisin cookies. The third batch because Teddy had called to confirm their existence with the gravity of someone verifying a contract clause. "He's asking about the little hot dogs," I told Nell. She leveled a spatula at me. "Tell him yes on the hot dogs. provided he walks in with his sister and his manners. I passed this along. Teddy said, "Deal," and hung up. I set up 3 long folding tables on loan from St. Anthony's community room and covered them with the blue dollar store tablecloths Nell kept in the linen closet for exactly this kind of thing. I started the charcoal grill at 4 so it'd be ready by 6. The shoebox sat on the kitchen table. I'd carried it in from the truck 2 weeks ago, the day after the party. It had been sitting in the middle of the table ever since, nestled between the sugar bowl and the fruit basket patient. And present the way something sits when it knows its moment is coming. Today was that moment. Inside the box, alongside Lily's wrapped shoes, I had placed the manila envelope, and over the prior 2 weeks I had added to it the mortgage refinancing document Clyde had gotten Karen to sign back in June, which her attorney had identified as a fraudulent attempt to transfer sole signatory authority over the property to Clyde without Karen's informed consent. The financial records subpoenaed from the joint account, documenting 17 transfers into a personal account Clyde had opened without telling Karen, and my brown notebook laid open to the pages where I had logged every repair, every grocery run, every school pickup, every tuition payment, the 3:00 a.m. furnace call. I wasn't bringing this to the table to wound anyone. I was bringing it because Clyde Whitlock had spent 6 years constructing a particular story about me. The old man with shoe polish on his hands who tagged along, patched things up, and was merely tolerated. I was putting it on the table so that story would have no ground left beneath it. Guests started arriving at 5:45. Bev came first, wearing her good walking shoes and carrying a pan of pecan squares. The Belford family arrived in one cheerful wave, 3 generations, the grandmother wrapping Nell in an embrace on the front walk with the easy warmth of 2 women who have weathered many Cleveland winters alongside each other. Lou Cipriani's teenage son drifted straight to the grill with the instinctive pull young men feel toward open flame. By 6:15, the yard held 47 people. I counted because I am the sort of man who counts. Karen arrived at 6:20, with Lily and Teddy Gray dress hair done eyes clear in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. She found my gaze at the gate and gave one nod. I gave one back. Lily came straight to me and wrapped both arms around my waist without a single word. I laid my hand on the back of her head and let her hold on. Teddy went straight to Nell and asked about the oatmeal raisin cookies at a volume that reached a good dozen people. Clyde arrived at 6:32. Button-down shirt, pressed trousers, shoes recently shined. He swept the yard with the unhurried posture of a man who has read the room and decided it's manageable. He put his hand out to me at the gate. Firm grip, 2 pumps. "Ev, good of you to put this together. Really glad you could come," I said. He moved into the yard, clasping hands with Lou, pulling a beer from the cooler, settling his arm across Karen's shoulders. I watched Karen's jaw tighten by exactly the measure she was permitting it to. I watched Lily over by the food table, watching her father with an expression that had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Nell appeared at my shoulder and slipped an iced tea into my hand. "He thinks this is a peace offering," she said low and even. "I know," I said. "Is Sandra coming?" Bev invited her, I said. I asked her to. Sandra never misses a neighborhood gathering. Bev said she takes pride in it. I needed her here tonight. Nell regarded me steadily over the rim of her glass. A long moment went by. "Then I suppose we're ready." The evening moved the way a good evening moves food and conversation, and the low, steady hum of cicadas up in the maple. Children cut between adult legs. Somebody delivered a punchline near the grill, and 3 people broke into laughter at once. I tended the coals. I topped off drinks. I moved through my yard among my neighbors and smiled at all of them and meant every bit of it, because these people, Bev, Lou, Gord, the Belfords, these people were the living record of my years on this street. At 7:15, I set my tongs down. I went inside. I came back out with the dark green shoebox. I placed it on the center table. I picked up the small wireless microphone Bev had lent me from the community room kit. 47 people. The yard eased into the particular quiet that settles over a crowd when someone lifts a microphone. Clyde, near the back fence with his beer, cut his eyes over. I started to speak. I opened with gratitude. That part was not theater. Most of you have known me a long time. I said it into the microphone, my voice steady and without hurry. Some of you have been carrying your shoes to my shop since before your children were born. Some of you have been my neighbors since Nell and I came to this street 31 years ago. I wanted to do this tonight because I think we sometimes neglect to say thank you out loud to the people who have kept our lives running. I found Bev first. "Bev, You have walked past my house every morning for 15 years and always raised a hand. That is a smaller gesture than it sounds, but only if you have never spent a winter in Cleveland feeling like you've become invisible. Bev pressed her palm flat against her heart. Her eyes went bright. Mrs. Belford, 2 winters back, when Nell's knee was giving her trouble, you picked up her prescription 3 Tuesdays in a row, without needing to be asked more than once. I haven't forgotten that. Mrs. Belford reached for Nell's hand and held it. Nell held back jaw, set the way it sets when she is feeling something she is quietly resolved not to cry over. I moved through the yard without rushing. Lou Cipriani, who had given up a Saturday to help me pull and replace a section of fence and never mentioned it again. Gord, who had steered 17 customers toward my shop over the years. The Hendersons, whose son had shoveled our walk twice that winter, on his own initiative. Clyde was still near the back fence, beer in hand, smile still in place, but both were tightening around the edges, watching me the way a man watches something he hasn't been able to classify. Then I turned toward Karen. I want to thank my daughter. Raising her is the second finest thing I have ever done. The first was persuading her mother to marry me. A low murmur of warmth moved through the yard. Nell made a sound that was close to a laugh. Karen has taught me more about patience than I knew I was missing. She is tougher than she gives herself credit for, and she is going to come through this fine. Karen had gone very still. Her eyes were fixed on my face, her chin making the small, controlled tremor of someone holding themselves together by sheer will rather than comfort. I let that sit for a moment. Then I reached into the shoebox. I also want to be honest with you tonight because I am 70 years old and honesty becomes less of a struggle the further along you get. The quality of attention in the yard shifted, sharpened, drew closer. I have spent 6 years helping to carry my daughter's household. I was at their door at 5 in the morning to drive my grandchildren to school. I cleared their driveway before my son-in-law's car needed to back out. I fixed their furnace at 2:40 a.m. in January when the temperature outside was 12 degrees. I kept my voice level. I am not saying any of this for recognition. I am saying it because what I did was invisible, and invisible things have a way of being mistaken for nothing at all. I opened the brown notebook, 840 days of school pickups, 23 repair jobs, 41 grocery runs, 14 months of mortgage assistance, 3 tuition payments, and 1 furnace installed at 2 in the morning that the man of the house acknowledged by coming downstairs to ask whether it was running and then heading back to bed. Clyde set his beer on the fence post. 3 months ago, at my granddaughter's birthday party in front of 50 guests, I was struck across the face by my son-in-law for asking him not to grab my 10-year-old granddaughter by the arm. He told me I was nobody, that repairing shoes gave me no standing. I paused and my daughter asked me not to make it bigger because it was a birthday party. I withdrew the manila envelope. I am not here to make it bigger. I am here so that every person in this yard understands the full picture, not my account of events, the documented one. 4 photographs, timestamps, running from 5:45 to 6:15 a.m. Clyde's vehicle parked in front of the house across the street on mornings he had told Karen he was heading to work early. A hotel receipt. February 14th, a personal account Karen had no knowledge of. Valentine's Day. A jewelry invoice, $795, purchased the same week I wired $800 for Lily's school tuition. The bracelet was not meant for my granddaughter. Bank records showing 17 transfers out of the joint account into the undisclosed personal account over 14 months. As Clyde came off the fence, his voice drawn thin and tight. "This is not the place for this. I'm nearly finished," I said. I didn't look at him. The final document, the refinancing authorization Karen had signed, on the understanding it was a routine bank review. Her attorney had concluded it was an attempt to transfer sole signatory authority over the property to Clyde, which would have let him sell the house without Karen's knowledge or consent. Dead silence. Clyde stepped 2 paces toward the table. "That is a complete mischaracterization." He stopped short. The gate swung open. Sandra Pruitt walked in, hair-done smile, already arranged, scanning the yard, with the relaxed ease of someone who has always expected to find herself welcome. Her eyes moved to Clyde, then to the table, then to the photographs lying face up on it. The smile fell away like something dropped. 47 people turned to look at her. Her hand went to her wrist to the bracelet in a motion so automatic she had no awareness of making it. I folded my hands on the table and looked directly at Clyde. "I didn't invite this neighborhood here to humiliate you," I said. I invited them because you spent 6 years making me invisible in this community, making jokes about my hands and my shop in rooms full of people who knew me long before you arrived. My voice stayed level. I invited them so that the next time you tell someone what kind of man I am, they will already have their own answer. Clyde's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Karen stepped forward. She walked past her husband without so much as glancing at him and came to stand beside me. She took my hand. Her grip was tight enough that it should have hurt. She turned to face Clyde. "You need to go," she said, completely steady. Nell's jaw, the backbone she had uncovered over 3 weeks of learning exactly what she was built from. Clyde looked at her, then at the yard, then at Sandra, who had pressed herself back against the gate and was staring at the ground. He picked up his keys. He walked out of my yard without another word. The gate clicked shut behind him. The yard breathed again, not all at once, but in the gradual way air returns to a room after a window has been thrown open too long in a storm. Bev put her arm around Mrs. Belford. Lou Cipriani cleared his throat and picked up his plate. Gord leaned toward the man next to him and said something quiet that earned a slow, deliberate nod. Sandra Pruitt slipped out through the gate without a word to anyone. I did not watch her leave. I began sliding the documents back into the manila envelope. Karen stood beside me and helped passing each item over as I reached for it. Her movements had the precision of someone who has passed through the far edge of shock and discovered that on the other side everything becomes strangely simple and clear. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Ask me in a week," she said. "Then yes, I think so. Yes." Teddy materialized from somewhere in the crowd and burrowed between us, throwing one arm around each of our waists and pressing his face against my side. 7-year-olds sometimes understand that a hug is the only correct response to a moment. When they do, it is something. I put my hand on the back of his head and held on. Lily came and stood in front of me. She looked up with those serious dark eyes, and in them I could see everything she had already understood and everything she was still sorting through. "Grandpa," she said, "is it over now?" "The hard part," I said. "Yes." She looked at the dark green shoebox still sitting on the table lid, on still wrapped. "Is that still mine?" she asked. "It has always been yours," I said. She carried it to the end of the table, sat down and undid the twine with the careful concentration she gives to everything that matters to her. She folded back the paper. She lifted one shoe out, turned it over, and read the words stamped into the sole. Her lips moved just slightly. She looked up. "You wrote this." "Stamped it," I said, "with the smallest letter set I own. Walk with kindness wherever you go." Her voice was deliberate with each word. The way she reads something she intends to keep. "That is my entire wish for you." I said the whole thing in one sentence. She set the shoe down. She crossed the 3 feet between us and wrapped her arms around my waist, the way she had, at 6, at 7, at 8. With the full, unguarded commitment of a child who has not yet learned to hold anything back. I held on to her and felt something loosen in my chest that had been held tight for a very long time. Over her head I looked at Nell. She was standing near the end of the table, her coffee gone cold as always, watching us with an expression she wasn't making any effort to manage. For Nell, that is the most complete form of happiness I know how to read. The evening wound itself down the way good evenings do. Bev was the last to leave. She embraced me at the gate and said nothing, which was exactly right. By 9 Sturwero, the yard was ours again. Nell and I moved through it together, gathering plates and folding chairs, working in the easy side-by-side rhythm of 2 people who have cleaned up after enough occasions that they no longer need to discuss it. Karen sat at the far end of the table with her tea, Lily and Teddy asleep against her on either side. She watched us move around the yard with an expression I chose not to interpret. Some things need to be felt before they can be put into words. When the yard was clear, I sat down across from her. "Dad." Her voice was quiet, careful not to wake the children. I spent 6 years choosing comfort over truth. Not just with Clyde with you. I kept telling myself that because you never complained, there was nothing to complain about. That because you always showing up, wasn't costing you anything. Her eyes were dry. She had already done the crying and come out somewhere more solid. I was wrong, and I am sorry. Not the kind of sorry that puts something to rest. The other kind. I know I said, "I'm going to do better," she said. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I know what it doesn't look like." "That's a good place to start," I said. Nell settled in beside me. Her hand found mine under the table. I held it. In the weeks that followed, the things that needed to happen moved forward and happened. Clyde vacated the house at his attorney's direction. The refinancing fraud was unwound. The financial records told a complete and coherent story, the kind that doesn't leave much room for dispute. I did not gloat. Not once, not to a single person. On the second Saturday of October, Lily came to the shop after-school backpack over her shoulder, wearing the brown leather shoes I had made for her. She climbed onto the wooden stool in the corner, the same one that has stood there since Karen sat on it as a little girl, still uneven on the left leg, and spread open her math book. "Fractions again?" I asked. "Percentages," she said. "Can you help?" "Pull up the stool," I said. "I'm already on the stool, Grandpa." "Then we're already started," I said. After a while, she looked up. "Grandpa, what does it mean when you love someone, but they hurt you?" I set the needle down. I looked at my granddaughter, 10 years old, wearing shoes I had stitched by hand, asking me the question I had been turning over for 70 years. "It means you're paying attention," I said, "and that you're going to be okay." She nodded seriously, went back to her percentages. I went back to the Oxfords. These hands have repaired a great many things. The most important thing they ever made was a pair of small brown shoes with 8 words pressed into the sole. "Walk with kindness wherever you go." If you stayed with me all the way to the end of this one, thank you. Truly, this story asked something of me to tell, and I hope it gave something back to you in return. Looking back, I think what this cost most wasn't the years of early mornings or the furnace calls at 2 in the morning, or the money I never asked to be repaid. What it cost was the silence, the long stretch of smiling and showing up while being treated like furniture. And what it taught me is that invisible service is still real service even when no one names it. I believe God sees what goes unacknowledged by people. His timing is rarely fast, but it is never wrong. The truth found its moment. It always does. If you take nothing else from this story, take these things. First, do not let the people who diminish you define the record, keep your own. Second, when someone shows you who they are in front of a crowd, believe them. Third, protect your children by telling them the truth was brave, not the burden. And fourth, the most powerful thing a man can do when he has been wronged is simply wait, document, and let the facts speak on their own. These are the kind of grandpa revenge stories that remind us dignity is not the same thing as silence, and the father stories like this one, of a man who showed up year after year without applause, matter more than most people realize until it is almost too late. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone in your life who has been made to feel invisible for too long. And if you haven't already subscribed to Grandpa's Revenge, there is more to come. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.